we'll just let everyone come in. How are you doing today, Zara?
Yeah, really well, thank you. We've actually got a little bit of sun up north today, which is nice rather than clouds. So, really well. Hope everybody else is doing well for a Wednesday.
Yeah, well, likewise here down here on the south coast, it's nice and sunny. It's very windy. My clothes area that I've got out in the garden keeps falling over, which is the worst of my problems today. Life, all in all, probably isn't that bad right now.
No,
We are
definitely.
just going to give it a few minutes. Thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. We're just going to let a few people filter in. Apologies if there was any issues with Zoom. I believe it was prompting logins for some users. So hopefully that's not going to cause too much of a delay. But just while we wait for a few people to come in, let's uh, let's just give that a moment. So yeah, I'm not sure how many of you have joined us for previous webinars. We like to try and keep things fairly casual as well as being informative. You may have noticed that I've had my hair cut since the last webinar. The sunnier weather, I thought I'd go a bit more trim up top. But unfortunately, it does have the effect of making me look like a bully from Grange Hill. So, could be worse.
Hopefully, we have people on the call old enough to remember Grange
Yeah,
Hill.
for anyone who doesn't know Grange Hill, it was basically adolescence in the 80s. So yeah. What time are we on? Let's have a
I'll
look.
give it another minute, I think.
Another minute.
Let people go.
So yeah, should we get cracking then? I'm sure as people will join us, they will catch up quickly. So welcome to our webinar today. This is winning strategies, maximizing bookings. I am Mike Coxon. You can see me there with my old haircut. I am the higher education and PBSA lead at StudentCrowd, and I am joined today by my wonderful colleague Zara McGeiver, who's our data solutions lead. She also has a vast experience, over 12 years experience working for PBSA operators. So she is very much going to be our oracle today as we have a look at how you can get the best out of your marketing strategy and ensure that you're maximizing occupancy, maximizing rent prices, and ultimately having the giving students the best experience possible. So as we have a look today, just to run through, as you can see there on screen, we're going to be having a look at how best to assess your marketplace, how to portray the best version of yourself and your brand, how to build out that marketing plan, and ultimately how to prove your efforts. So yes. Just to give some background, I know an awful lot of you will have joined us for previous webinars, so thank you for returning. And a lot of you will also be familiar with StudentCrowd as a brand, but for those of you who aren't, we'll give you just a quick little run through of what we do. We are very much a business of two halves. So we work with students on a daily basis, providing them with a platform to leave reviews, give their insights, and ultimately help other students inform their decisions on where they want to study, and most importantly, for yourselves, where they want to live through verified peer-to-peer advice. But what we also have is the largest and most in-depth data set of student accommodation PBSA information in the marketplace. So as you can see a little bit here, we have live operational data that's refreshed every week by our team of humans, not scraping the data, making sure that we're checking everything is correct with a fine-tooth comb. We cover 100% of the market in the UK, Ireland, and Spain. That is also being now extended to Germany and France. And we're also adding in a variety of other exciting products and data sets. So a number of cities across Europe are going to be added, as well as BTR and co-living data for the UK, and a number of city spotlight dashboards, as well as a whole host of very exciting information that we can provide. Ultimately, our data is of the highest quality. It is also unbiased, so we don't come at it from any angle other than portraying the fact, and it meshes in there students' verified opinions, giving you a completely rounded perspective of the PBSA marketplace.
Great, thanks, Mike. So let's get into it. So one of the first things that we need to do when looking at maximising bookings is assess your market. And it is a critical first step to truly understand the city. It's the foundation to increase bookings in PBSA buildings. Each city offers a different landscape, so we need to ensure that you are offering you're aligning your offering, effectively. And in order to do that, we need to analyze a number of key factors. So I think the best way to do this, Mike, actually is just to dive straight into our tool, and let's have a
Let's
look.
do that. So forgive the seamless crossover there.
uh, let's take a look at Bristol. Actually, that's been quite a popular city recently. I know a lot of people have asked me for some data on that, so
Let's jump in.
what they want, as we always do. So so one of the first things that we need to look at when you're assessing your market is the demand and supply. So understanding the balance, or in some cases imbalance, between the number of students looking for accommodation and the available beds in that city is essential, particularly when that comes to shaping your rental strategy, which we will touch on later. So Mike, if you just want to take a look at those numbers for us in Bristol.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we can see down here, within Bristol student population, according to HESA data, there is around 60,770 students, with a split of around 42,500 domestic to just over 18,000 international. Now, what we can also see alongside that is the supply and demand figures. So our demand figures are based around that HESA data, but only looking at students who are looking for accommodation. So it strips out any students that own their own home or commute to the universities. And we can see that at the moment there are 20,888 beds currently on the market in Bristol for a demand of just over 40,000 students looking for accommodation.
Great, thanks, Mike. So future planning is also another important aspect. It's not just about what's happening now and the numbers that the Mike's just gone through with us. It's actually about for preparing what's on the horizon. So we need to make sure that we are proactive and not reactive. And you'll hear me saying that quite a lot throughout this webinar. But when new properties are announced, or existing ones undergo significant renovations, quite simply the landscape changes. So be actually quite interesting to see, Mike, how many new properties are we looking at getting in Bristol in the next 12 months?
Absolutely. So if we look, we've got our filter on here for pipeline properties in the next 12 months, and we can see that there's an estimated 2,160 new PBSA beds that are going to be built in Bristol over the next 12 months or go operational.
Okay, that's actually not too bad. Out of interest, what does that look like for the next 5 years?
So if we put it up to 5 years, that is quite a significant increase. So that jumps up to an additional 12,441 beds being currently planned to be operational in the next 5 years.
Wow. Okay. Now, it's important to note that not all of these schemes will get approved, but this is the exact reason why you need to make sure that you keep your eye on any new properties entering the market, as it can disrupt established dynamics. We know Bristol to be, a relatively buoyant city. Adding that number of beds into that mix can naturally change that. So it's really crucial to keep an eye on those upcoming developments. And by being aware of these competitor launches, you can also make yourself familiar with their unique selling points. And that means that you can then, use that to adapt your own personal sales and marketing strategies, understanding the USPs of these new sites, the size of them, any amenities that you may have. It allows you to position yourself appropriately to make sure that you remain desirable to students to book your accommodation. It's never nice when a shiny new scheme gets built next door, but by being aware of that, you are able to almost counteract that within your strategy. Speaking of competitors, they are a crucial component in the occupancy equation. You should regularly perform, a thorough competitor analysis to understand what others in the market are offering. This will allow you to, as I mentioned before, identify gaps in your own offerings and adjust your strategy accordingly. are they providing any special incentives, offering any amenities that you don't? So when we're comparing competitors, it can be quite easy to look at those that are just nearest to us, but it really is essential to conduct a like for like analysis rather than merely just, as I mentioned, those sites that are next door. So this means evaluating schemes that closely align with your own, and that's in terms of age, property type, target market, distance to universities. So, for instance, a newly built all singing, all dancing scheme will likely attract a different demographic compared to a non-ensuite, Gen 1 scheme. So by ensuring that you are, comparing yourself with those similar position buildings, you can gain a clearer understanding of how your offerings stack up, against your micro competitors. So let's take a look at that. So let's just say we are now building a lovely all singing, all dancing studio scheme in Bristol. And let's take a look at what that competitor set would look like.
Yeah, sure. So we can filter down in here, and obviously, nobody knows your schemes better than yourselves, but it's a great way to establish what it is you should be doing and who you should be looking at. So we've limited it just to private schemes that operate studios. Like Zara said, it's going to be all singing, all dancing. So we probably want somewhere that's got an entertainment room and maybe a gym in there, and somewhere that is providing a study space for the residents, and that way we know that we're covering off everything from a social life and an academic life. And what we can see is that has drilled us down to, I think, about probably 9 properties, 10 properties that fit our criteria. So if we want to, we can then drill that down. As Sarah mentioned, it's ideal not just to have a look at your neighbours, but we can drill down into a slightly more micro location where we can see, say, in the centre of Bristol. And this has drilled us down to 7 competitors who have a similar image of what we're looking to build with our property, or what we potentially, hypothetically, are already running when looking at this.
Definitely. And that's a really good number, actually, Mike. We should never really want to have more than 10 competing sites for each one of our schemes. For me, the ideal number is between that 5 and 7. And that's just because different properties quite simply appeal to different student demographics. So what we really need is that apples to apples comparison to help us identify the strengths and weaknesses that are truly relevant to your prospective tenants, because each student will want something different. So are your competitors, are they offering incentives maybe, or a different tenancy length? By being aware of their strategies, you can, as I mentioned, you can differentiate yourself and your property to make sure that it's positioned in the best light. Speaking of positioning, a slight side note, going off track a little bit, Mike, as I usually do, but when we talk about key selling points, it really is essential to highlight what makes your property stand out. Is it the community? Is it the atmosphere? Is it the staff? Is it the state-of-the-art facilities, or perhaps flexible tenancy options? It doesn't need to be a shiny new cinema room. It can be something that, as I mentioned, something that's unique to that building, such as the property manager themselves. But by identifying these unique selling points, it will help capture the attention of your potential tenants, because you know what's unique to you and that's what will resonate with them. Remember, students are not just looking for a place to sleep. What we're actually selling them is a home. They want a community that will enhance their university experience, not one that will negatively impact it. So that's just something to bear in mind. Swiftly moving on, though, let's move on to always the hottest topic, which is rents. So rents play a significant role in attracting bookings, which we know, but setting competitive yet profitable pricing is a fine balance. Some would probably call it an art, in all honesty. One of the things we need to do is look at the average rents firstly for your micro market. So before you consider what the market is doing a whole, actually look at how it compares to your like-for-like competitors, which is what Mike's done here. So there's currently a graph on screen at the moment, which is actually showcasing those 7 competing sites to our hypothetical new shiny building, which Mike and I are building in Bristol. And this is roughly what the current rents are showing. So Mike, I don't know if you want to talk through that graph at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So just looking at that micro marketplace, we can see that largely for the higher end studios, based on our search, it has been a fairly steady marketplace over the last 3 years. We can see there's been slightly less of an increase in terms of room prices on average go for this cycle, but they are still tracking ahead of last year. They are also looking fairly consistent against the marketplace. There's not any major dips and trends there, and that's what we want to see really as any cycle progresses. No sudden movements, or certainly not any sudden movements heading downwards, and everything looking fairly steady.
Great. Out of interest, what does the overall private market look like in Bristol? So still excluding those university sites, but
If we
encompassing all room
strip
types.
down to all room types, all features on the table, it is a slightly different picture. We can see that certainly over the last year and a half, prices have started to, on average, reduce, and we're at a point where the current cycle is actually tracking in line with last year in terms of average rent price. And we can see here maybe the key differentiator there is that there are more properties in the marketplace at present than there were this time last year. This is actually looking at our micro location. So if we zoom that out, it's also a reflection that we will see in the wider city. But again, we can drill down and we can have a look as close as we like, but it's the same picture, very much now actually tracking year on year in terms of pricing behind. There's additional 5 buildings where we're currently looking, so that may explain it. Certainly more supply compared to demand, but as we've already seen, there's going to be a significant amount of PBSA beds potentially coming online in the next 5 years. So something definitely operators in Bristol should be mindful of.
Great, thanks for that, Mike. And you've actually just proved exactly why you need to keep your finger on the pulse and regularly check those competitor and market rates in your city. As I mentioned before, ideally, in my view, you should be doing that weekly. And it's crucial for several reasons. First of all, it helps you stay in tune with the pricing landscape. As we've seen, it can shift swiftly in some cities, but it also enables you to position your rates competitively and avoid overpricing. More importantly, underpricing your offerings as well. So by understanding where your rates stand in relation to those, micro location competitors and those similar properties, you can then make informed adjustments to attract more bookings rather than trying to compare yourself, apples to oranges, as we mentioned before. Now, last but not least, I think we absolutely also need to touch on student sentiment when it comes to assessing the market. It's can change city by city, and it really is vital in you understanding how your property is positioned from the end user's perspective in the market. So we do have the luxury here of having our fantastic StudentCrowd tool where we can actually see the student sentiment based on our reviews. So Mike, I don't know if you want to take a quick look at what that looks like for Bristol.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at the private marketplace for Bristol, where the data's available, we can see, for example, the value for money. You're able to drill down into the individual buildings and see where the darker coloured buildings on these dots are ones where the students are rating them very highly on value for money. The lighter colouring suggests that maybe they're being scored slightly lower in comparison to the competitors. So again, it would allow you to pick out exactly what students think of yourselves compared to the market. Again, we can have a look at a variety of metrics. So we can look at location. Again, we can see a much more positive sentiment towards living right in the heart of Bristol compared to living slightly further afield within the city. Or if we look at social experience, again, and this is where it gets very interesting because you get a much more mixed pattern across the city. And as we all know, social experience is vital to students in their accommodation feeling more like a home. So again, it's just making sure that you keep it on top of this kind of sentiment and this kind of feeling from your students.
Definitely. And, we know not everybody has the luxury of having access to the StudentCrowd's insight tool. There are other ways for you to get feedback if you don't have the system. Quite simply, engaging with current residents, any prospective tenants can provide valuable insights into their perceptions of, your property and any competitors. The perfect time to do that is, when you're conducting viewings and you're adding your fact-finding questions, where have you stayed previously, where else have you viewed? And you're able to start a conversation about maybe why they didn't book at said competing site and why they're still viewing your site. So, please don't underestimate the value of those conversations that you have in passing when students are collecting the mail or, just heading out to university, because that is really vital insights that you can get. You can also, conduct surveys, facilitate focus groups, community events. But ultimately, understanding how students view your property and competing properties with the location as well can definitely highlight areas where you can innovate and improve specifically to attract your target market. Okay, so moving on slightly. So by focusing on the key, oh, Mike, I think you just need to go back one slightly ahead. Yeah. So by focusing by focusing on the key points that are on screen at the minute, I won't read them all out for you, but you can, start the foundation to build an effective strategy that will increase your occupancy and overall appeal of your buildings. Now, unfortunately, that is not all you need to do. That is just the start, but it's certainly the foundation. Next, what you then need to consider is, how are you showing the best version of yourself? How do students see you, and are they going to see you in the best light? So we know that Gen Z are, an experiential generation. They are digital natives. They are completely the opposite to me as a millennial who will buy anything on Instagram if an influencer sells it. They have grown up with that and they are completely attuned to when they are being sold to. So one of the key drivers for Gen Z is to seek authentic peer-to-peer reviews. It's why platforms such as TikTok and YouTube have taken off so much, because they can see product reviews and they can see people that they resonate with and gain their experience from it.
And like Zara said, it is vital to gain that insight from your peers and to be able to make the most informed decision possible. If you can imagine any key decision that you're making, whether that's buying a house, renting a new property, buying a car, doing your kitchen up, whatever that may be, you want to make sure that you have the most in-depth information possible. And sign up for accommodation is a huge decision for students. They want to be informed, as do their parents. So they spend an awful lot of time researching their options. And that is why making sure that you have the best and most proactive review strategy in place is vital. Reviews are vital, really, to your reputation marketing, whether that's using them within your marketing collateral, whether that's using it to inform how you develop your brand and what features you add into your properties. Ultimately, reviews can help really drive that forward. Now, obviously, StudentCrowd provide this in the most authentic manner that we possibly can. We only take and publish reviews from verified students. They have to have that relevant.ac.uk email address in order to leave a review of the relevant property. But we also provide a safe and trusted space for students to be able to go and seek that advice. They know that the information they're getting is unbiased, that it's fair, that it's coming from their peers, and ultimately that any brands that they're engaging with are going to be receptive and holding their interests at heart by engaging with them. Ultimately, as well, we provide that real-time feedback, and that's vital when it comes to informing your strategy, even on a micro level. Being able to get that insight into the service you're offering, the recognition that you may be receiving as a brand or that members of your staff may be receiving, and identifying any areas of immediate improvement that you can make, and showing that proactivity in doing so really does help drive forward your strategy, and ultimately, again, comes back to how important taking those reviews on board is. And one little graph just to highlight that. So this is from our friends at UCAS. It's looking at how students use different sources to inform decisions. So, in this case, where they're going to apply for university or college. And as you can see there, online reviews are the third most important source of information for students when making those key decisions, behind only UCAS themselves and the universities attending. Open days or virtual events, depending on their location. So it really does show that students, when making these key decisions, do really put reviews at the heart of that, and therefore it's vital to make sure that you're on top of your strategy.
Great. So let's look at a real world example. So this is a case study from a private provider that we've worked with for a while, and they specifically worked with the site teams and marketing teams to really focus on review generation and student experience. You know, they did some really great work there. In shaping the strategies around these specific areas, they've actually been able to drive their ROI to be 35 times the marketing spend, which no matter how many times I read this, I can't get over. Student engagement has, been through our platform as well as their own dedicated app that they have. And it's actually allowed them to really understand the student mindset and allowed for a more adaptable approach to exceeding student expectations, alongside being able to provide social proof in the support of the student booking journey, which, as we mentioned before, is absolutely vital with Gen Z students. Since focusing on both reviews and engagement, not only have they delivered an exceptional ROI that we mentioned before, but they've actually also increased their overall StudentCrowd rating from 4.3 to 4.5 stars. So that is the portfolio as a whole. Obviously, some buildings will differ. The importance, though, here is that while the ROI is being delivered immediately, and that's a very tangible result that they can see from bookings and engagement, the increase in the review rating lasts, it continues to influence the next generation of decision makers and thereafter. So while you can track an initial amazing return on investment, actually does that go further with the next set of decision makers that will also be seeing those reviews? And in my view, it really does, it plays out. We see that as any operator focuses on reviews, the score increases by an average of 5% for every additional 30 reviews. So it's not a big mountain to climb to get up that league table, if you like, and get to that matrix within the fours, which we all want. For the majority of students, they will use the default sorting when they actually look at StudentCrowd, and the higher scores result higher in the league table. So from what we see there, there's massive engagement gains to be made from potential bookers by just a slight increase in your score. So profiles on average gaining 5 times more clicks as they move up the rankings, which have a huge impact on overall bookings. And what we can see is that they gain that if you have above 4 stars. So that should absolutely be the minimum that you want to be aiming for. Ultimately, the more reviews you get, it encourages more to be left, as nobody wants to be the first one to write a review. So it actually turns it into quite a virtuous cycle, so to speak.
Absolutely. So, what is shaping the selection for students when they are when they are making these decisions, and when ultimately you should be looking at what's important in your marketing strategy as well? The location, as we can see from where we've run through in the insights tool earlier. So, being close to the campus or a city centre, having transport links, nightlife, shopping options, whatever that may be, that's important to the student is obviously a huge factor in the decisions that they make. The price versus the perceived value. And again, this comes back to where we were having a look at the value for money. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're offering the cheapest property. What it does mean is making sure that students are getting the right offering for their budget, and it is meeting their expectations, that they're not being sold one thing and turning up and being underwhelmed, because ultimately that is going to leave that negative sentiment and have that knock-on effects when you're looking at things like rebookers. The different amenities and facilities, again, it very much depends on the level that you are offering, but being able to provide them with what they need, whether that's study space, in some cases, whether that may be a cinema or a gym, whether it's just having outdoor space, or whether it's simply providing the best Wi-Fi or laundry facilities, ultimately meeting that individual student's need. And then again, the reviews and peer influence. So making sure that there is trust that their student feedback is being listened to, making sure that when they go and read that feedback, it is something that they can believe in, that they can see reflected in their behaviours. And ultimately making sure that you're getting the best scores possible over simply making a lot of noise for your brand without following it up.
Definitely. And once the students move in, their expectations must align with reality. You know, the staff, team presence, transparency in marketing, prompt maintenance requests, strong community, you know, all of which impact their satisfaction. Unresolved maintenance issues are common pain points that drive negative reviews, as well as where their expectations in general haven't been met. So it's particularly acute when people are related, for example, you know, staff not being friendly, or when it's directly causing discomfort regularly. For example, a student has asked for a quiet room but continually hears noise from the neighbouring room, or they feel they can't have the curtains opening because the bedroom window is directly opposite a busy street. So all of these elements correlate with a negative assessment on value for money, which is why it's a top priority for a third of students in making their final choice. Value for money is that really key driver. And, you know, the good news is, I've mentioned this before, but a lot of these things are absolutely within your gift to deliver. You don't have to have a really nice, shiny new scheme to give high levels of satisfaction. It is about responding promptly to maintenance issues and dealing with students' issues quickly and respectfully. So here's what the data actually tells us. So Mike, sorry, just go on to the next slide. Yeah, great, thank you. So 11% of students nationally talk about maintenance response in direct relation to satisfaction, as I mentioned before. So work quick response times drastically improve satisfaction. A lack of response drastically reduces satisfaction. We used a great example, actually. Mike and I were in Sheffield. A proportion of the students talking about maintenance is slightly less. It's 10.5%. We use Sheffield as an example in this because we know this is another common city that a lot of people are actually asking us about at the moment. But interestingly, ratings, you know, in Sheffield are being negatively affected more in the last 3 years around issues with laundry. And, it's 45% higher than the national average in Sheffield. So if you do have a building in Sheffield, then you know that laundry is certainly top of the students' list in terms of dissatisfaction. I think that's been quite a common theme right throughout, I've noticed this year. But experience is also key to understanding this at a micro level, because different markets will be affected by different specifically local things. So that's why it's important. Outside of this, the single biggest influence on experience is, unsurprisingly, service levels and staff. You know, staff have the greatest impact on the student experience, and I know firsthand how hard the property teams work to ensure that they foster those great communities whilst wearing 15 other hats and doing 20 other jobs. So, but ultimately, 30% of students, as I've said, will describe their experience and rate their experience by how they are treated on site by the staff members. So ultimately addressing these areas proactively, as we mentioned before, be proactive, not reactive, can definitely enhance your retention and rebooker rates, as well as driving those all-important positive reviews that Mike spoke about earlier. Okay, so next, what we now need to look at is, how do you build your plan? So we've looked at the foundation, we've done our market analysis, we've ensured that from a student perspective, we have some great reviews on our buildings. But now what we actually need to look at is, how we can pull things together to actually create an effective marketing plan. So I just need to know, I can't give you the magic one today. This will be a very high level overview, given our limited time with just 10 minutes. But hopefully we can cover off the key elements that you need to consider, in order to form a successful marketing strategy. I will make a note now, if anybody does have any questions after this, or they'd like to delve into this, a little bit further, please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Mike, and we can pick this up. Because 45 minutes is definitely not long enough to go through all of this. But if we start off by examining a typical occupancy cycle, one of the things we can do is actually identify the key months where our focus should shift between attracting rebookers and securing new bookers. So typically we would aim to attract rebookers from November to January, and that ensures that our existing residents are motivated to rebook. So we'll put on lots of nice events for them, lots of collateral throughout the site, all encouraging them to rebook the room. Once we transition into February, though, the focus naturally shifts towards attracting those new bookers. In some markets, you might also want to consider offering short-term lets to fill any voids that you may have and capture those summer bookings. So Edinburgh, for example, absolutely thrives in the summer for the Fringe Festival. And it is recommended that if you are building those bookings into your longer term strategy, for me, you should absolutely be advertising summer bookings from as early as December to maximize visibility. You've got more chance of the students finding you. Also, if it is advertised on your website, you have more chances of language schools or those that do summer courses engaging with you to secure those rooms early to make sure they can actually house the students that they have on that course. So it's really important to get out there early with your short-term let bookings, in my opinion. And ultimately, by understanding and leveraging the seasonal dynamics, it allows you to allocate your marketing resources effectively and to target the right audience at the right time. We absolutely need to be tuning into students in the shopping window as well as the buying window. So knowing when to focus on rebookers versus new bookers just enables you to, as I said, tailor your strategies and anticipate high and low demand so that you can ultimately prepare accordingly. Okay, so let's just have a look at what else we need to do and we need to include. So we need to remember that not one size fits all. So when discussing marketing strategies for your buildings, it's vital to differentiate between your local and national campaigns. National campaigns will provide you with a consistent framework that can be applied across all of your properties. So regardless of whether they're Gen 1 or Gen 5, I think we may be up to now. But, it will cover those essential elements such as your broad promotional strategies, digital marketing tactics, your PPC, paid social, website optimization. And this will really ultimately help you recognize your brand consistency on a much larger scale. So if they go into one of your properties in Leeds versus one of your properties in London, they will absolutely get that same experience from a brand perspective. Local campaigns, though, on the other hand, require a much more nuanced approach as they must reflect the unique characteristics, demographics, and culture of each city. So, for instance, Manchester has a great tram network. So you may want to utilise advertising on trams if you've got a building in Manchester. That's not something you would do in Liverpool because it doesn't have that same network. Or you can utilise local events, festivals, things that will resonate more deeply with students because they can tap into the city's identity, the lifestyle of the building. Local campaigns should really be specific to the target demographic of each building. As we mentioned, every building will almost have a different soul and attract a different audience. So your local campaigns really should be tapping into those students that will actively be staying in your property. And you need to take into consideration factors such as, age, interest, local trends, just to really make sure that you gauge that meaningful connection with, new and any potential residents. It's also really crucial to consider the style and features of each property when looking at your local campaigns. So, for example, a really modern vibrant PBSA building may benefit from different social media campaigns showcasing, their amenities and the community events and a vibrant student life. But if you have a more traditional property, so for example, some of the college schemes in Durham, you might actually want to focus on the historical significance or the proximity to the local educational institute. Ultimately, you don't always have to rely on having nice, shiny new features in your building to really showcase, some of the USPs to the students. The location can be a USP. The history of the building for many students can be a USP. I use the example of Beton House in Sheffield quite a lot, actually. That was, we had quite a lot of architect students that were interested in booking that because of the history of the building. So you don't always have to rely on having those amenities for your local marketing. As we mentioned before, leverage social proof through ratings and reviews, tailor that to each locality to, really enhance the standing with the students. So by getting, individual property managers to reply to those reviews, offline marketing, efforts as well, such as leaflets within the building, just create a strong presence with the student. And then finally, really just property specific marketing elements. So signage, point of sale materials, digital screens, ensuring that you're attending things like local housing fairs and partnerships with local agents for short-term lets can really enrich your local marketing strategy. This is something that I could absolutely talk through for hours, but as we mentioned before, we are limited on time today. So that hopefully that gives you, a very high level view of the difference between your national and local campaigns and the things that you should consider. But by harmonizing national brand consistency with highly targeted local campaigns that consider the unique demographics of, and styles of each building, you can really engage with potential residents, drive your bookings, and ultimately elevate your occupancy rates across the portfolio. Okay, so I don't think we're going to have time for this top tips. So I think we can post this on LinkedIn as a separate follow-up. So it just highlights some of the top tips that I would give you in terms of tracking your new bookers and helping drive students to your site. But I think we've been quite thorough in our other parts. So what we will do is actually zip this up and we'll post this on LinkedIn and send it to you as a follow-up of the webinar as well for your nighttime reading. As we mentioned earlier on, if there is any questions that you have off the back of this, you can either pop them in the chat now and we will be able to get back to you, or please reach out to us. I think there is a QR code coming on screen in a moment that should be on the next slide that you can scan, and it'll enable you to just book a quick meeting in for me if you've got anything to ask about your property specifically, or you want to dive into any of the topics that we discussed today.
So yeah, I guess that wraps up. So thank you for joining us, guys. Sorry, there was an awful lot of information for us to try and cram in there. And as mentioned, we will be following up. There'll not only be a recording of this coming out to you, but also we'll follow up with the collateral. And if you have any questions or wish to discuss anything further, then we are always happy to have a chat about everything. So all that remains is to say thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Zara, for your insights and your experience. And hopefully there's been some valuable nuggets of information on there. We hope to see you again soon on our next webinar, which we'll be announcing shortly, and at as many events, calls, and meetings as we all know and love to attend within this wonderful marketplace that is PBSA. So have a great afternoon, enjoy the sunshine, and we will speak to you soon.
Thanks, guys.